By the way, everyone, we were just talking off air. Welcome to $1 Million Agent, the podcast. Susan's in the background setting it all up. Many of you may not know this. Susan, originally born in Shanghai, has been working with me for over a decade. What people don't know is that she is an exceptional English student. She studied 4-unit English. Contrary to what you would expect someone from Shanghai that would have nailed physics and chemistry and mathematics, but it's not the case, right? Hasn't the case. In fact, when we were doing our auctions, Susan, remember we used to do our auctions and you used to be on Zoom with me and you would be putting in the chat box the bid. What I'd have to say, John, when we're doing the bid, at 1.5 million's the bid, at 1.5 million's the bid, at 150,000,000 is the bid, right? And that's how Susan used to, maths was never your great subject, was it, Susan? She's in the background there.
Yeah, can you start this again? Because I don't think people care. Can you start?
No, they do care. They actually told us they like it when we talk about everything else but real estate. But we are going to talk to you about, one of our favorite subjects today, one of my favorite subjects. In fact, I made a living for the last probably 15 years or maybe 17 years of my adult life. I lived and worked with News Corp, courier newspapers who became News Corp. And both John and Troy and I have known Seth because he's been working in this industry as long as we have through his printing company. Mm-hmm. But we keep going back to Seth. We've done it with Mastery because he's a wealth of information. Seth Watts is a wealth of information because he has data that shows where the money in vendor-paid advertising goes to. Like, where does VPA money go to? And this is very important because there was a time when the way the typical marketing campaign in real estate looked like when you gave it to a vendor was there was a signboard. Yep, we need a signboard. We need a floor plan. We need a floor plan. Photography, yep. We need a video started to come into play, realestate.com, domain.com. But a big part of the component was print media, where print existed. In fact, Seth, there were times where I'd look at marketing schedules and depending on the area, eastern suburbs, 80% of it could be in the print campaign. 2-3 years ago, News Corp pulled out of a lot of markets. Fairfax did as well. So what's happened to all this money that was being spent, and have vendor-paid advertising budgets gone down?
That's a great question, Tom. So, g'day, John. G'day, Troy. Great to see you guys.
Right. So
the short answer to that is that they dropped pretty quickly in 2018-19, Tom, as newspapers came off the boil. I think news was actually reading the writing on the wall. That wasn't, the die had been cast by that point for a lot of their publications. But interestingly, it almost popped up back up to exactly where it was by 2021-22. As the boom hit, your listeners and everybody who's watching this right now basically took all of those skills that they used for newspapers. The portals became more expensive, but more interestingly, there was this explosion we saw in social media marketing, video, high-end photography, drone photography, lots of different digital tools that started to come through. And might I also add, a lot of people in the industry figured out how to bring some of their costs under the schedule. And I don't mean that negatively, but things like digital proposals and other subscriptions actually popped up on the schedules in recognition that they're actually for the vendor's benefit. So we pretty quickly saw in 21-22 this big spike up again. But what we are seeing, and Tom, I'm actually not sure if this happened as much in the newspaper era, but it might have. I don't have data that far back. But what we're seeing now is, as the prices of property comes down, the amount of VPA invested is coming down. So we're seeing the sort of a perfect storm. There's less volume of listings in the market, but at the same time, there's less money being invested. So this is probably the emptiest, least crowded, least competitive advertising space I've ever seen in real estate, at least in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's bloody interesting what an agent can do with that if they start to think about this market, which is tough, I'll be the first to admit, but this market, I think, is giving the opportunity for the next gen of leaders and brands to come through, because it is just absolutely empty.
So you're saying you can stand out. You're saying you can stand out a lot more now than what you could previously because there's less of your competitors actually spending. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So a couple of things. Unless you're in South Australia. So if you're in South Australia, you have got a market which has been remarkably resilient. VPA, which looks more and more like Sydney and Melbourne every single year. So South Australia and Perth as well are sort of my exceptions. Those markets are surprisingly resilient and kicking ass. So all power to everybody over in that side of the world. However, if you're in Melbourne and Sydney, people are spending 20% less on VPA, and there are 20 to 30% less listings in the market. Do the math on that, right? So you've got less listing volume, spending less money. That means that there are less adverts out there, there's less marketing taking place, there's less stuff in the letterbox. If you are an ambitious agent, if you are thinking about this as a chance to take market share, if you're thinking about this as a chance to build your brand and to create something special, there's never, ever been a better time than this.
Yeah, that's well said.
Seth, I'm not sure how deep your data goes, but is there a correlation, according to your data, between people who invest more in marketing, and I'm assuming most will be vendor paid marketing,
yep,
and the success of the sale, lower days on market, better price or better auction clearance rate, or are you not able to kind of draw a connection between the success of a property sale and the amount of money invested to market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, John, and it's a hard question to answer because the data is messy, right? But our sort of data analysts have done quite a bit of work trying to answer that question. And listen, my answer, I've got to put some caveats around this. This is in the labs, right? So this is not something that I would take to the bank. But what it's showing to us is that VPA has great returns to a point in the mid-market and then peters off. And so what we found is if you're selling an average sale price, if you're investing up to $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, you're getting better and better returns as you invest more. After about 12, 13,000, and this will be different if you're in Vaucluse or the fancy suburbs of Melbourne and Brisbane, but after a certain number, it sort of plateaus a bit. So keep in mind the average punter in Australia is spending $4,500 on marketing. John, in most of your market, they might spend 6 or 7. They're not spending 12.
Yeah,
so
true.
If you do invest more, the answer is absolutely, but it becomes, I think, less effective if you start to get to the mega campaigns. We occasionally see a $30,000, $40,000 campaign. Listen, that's going to work if you're selling something you want to speak to an international market, but it's probably not going to get you a better price for your property in Blacktown.
Yeah, so if you spend, the difference between spending 4 and 8 might get you a better price, but maybe
Absolutely.
8 and 15 may not.
Yeah, that's up to a pretty high number that's well above the averages.
Take your supplier hat off for a minute, Seth, and just imagine you were a seller today, and I'm sure you have been or you will be. Knowing what you know about the whole marketing side of selling a property, give us 2 or 3 things off the top of your mind, question without notice, that you would be likely to do that would be insightful. If you were talking to a buddy and they said, I'm going to sell my house, Seth, you're in this space, what should I be doing? What should I not be doing? What comes to mind? Because you've been very experienced in print media, in obviously digital, in campaign advertising, in funding of campaigns. Yeah. What things come to mind?
Well, the best example is I sold my house a little while ago now, but so maybe I can answer the question about what I did and how I thought about it when I was a vendor. So for a start, agent selection is obviously super important, and that was for me about finding the right agent who could relate to my wife. So that was super important to me because ultimately she was the decision maker in our house, and I needed somebody who was empathetic. Slightly paying for me because I know every agent in the market, so I was looking and use the honest answer that it was that connection with my wife. So read the play on the relationship you're selling it to. But a couple of things I thought about is I tried to pick the right channel for what I wanted to achieve in a campaign. So as a vendor, I wanted to get a boatload of people into the property. So when I thought about that, I wanted to go as far as I possibly could digitally. So I wanted to leverage the realestate.com, and I spent quite a bit of money on social. And I said, great, I want to reach, if the average punter is reaching 50,000 people, I want to reach 100,000. So that means I've got to be at the top of REA, the top of domain. I want to be on socials. I really want to reach broadly to make the funnel as wide as possible. But then I pretty quickly pivoted and said, you know what? Of the 100,000 people I want to speak to, 50 are going to actually come to my home. I got lucky, John. I had about 120 who came to my home, but I wasn't going to have a lot. So then I spent a lot of money at that end of the funnel. And then I spent a boatload of money when they actually came to my house. So I had a beautiful 1920s house, not very big, worst house in the best street in Melbourne. And I wanted to sell a luxury dream. So I spent a fortune on the brochure and the material on a printer. So there's a bias there, but strategically what I was trying to do is to say the 50 people who walk in that front door, especially in this market, are the most valuable people in my life right now, because I need 3, maybe 2 of them to create competition for the property. And if I don't impress the pants off them, I'm screwed. So I treated those.
What was the different? What did you do at the pointy end, a la brochure, etc. That you
I spent $2,000 on a stunning brochure, right? And I knew that it was going to be a Chinese buyer, so I created an entire brand for that property that was focused on that market. Not every property is different. And you know what? I had 3 Chinese Australians competing for the property on the day, and it worked beautifully. And all 3 of them said, you know what? That brochure told me what the property was about. They all complimented me on it, and I was trying to create the emotional connection. So what I think people should think about there is marketing is about getting lots of people in, and once you capture buyers, what are you doing to impress them? And if you're an agent, how the hell are you standing out? Are you giving, is your point of sale, is your OFI, is your presentation on the day standout, or is it mundane? Does it look like you're cutting corners and you're just one of the pack, or are you showing that you've got passion for the property yourself? I think people underestimate how important the OFI experience is, because where the hell do you have an industry where you're spending $5,000 of your vendor's money to speak to 100,000 people, and every week that money pays for you to meet your 50 next clients? Like, what are you doing in the others? I mean, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I mean, Seth, we are a very big supporters and encouragers of real estate agents to use marketing. The number one reason we tell them to use marketing is it's good for their clients. Their clients will get more people. Their clients will actually get, and this is, Seth, this is something that is often missed with real estate agents and vendor paid advertising. Example, the water that's in this here is out of my tap. It's odorless liquid. It's free, odorless liquid. The water that you pick up from this bottle here probably paid $2-3, right? You could go get a bottle of Pellegrino, you pay $10 for it, right? The same thing's in there. It's an odorless liquid. But what happens is it's the perceived value of that item that dramatically increases. And what you're saying is you've got this brochure that you've done as an upmarket brochure, right? It's improving the perceived value. And often I would find that many vendors would end up agents would tell me the way they used to upsell them in a campaign is they would list the property, they'd have some sort of campaign, then they'd come back, provide a double-page spread ad they had produced, and they would sit there in front of the vendor and say, listen, we're about to go to market, but I went to the trouble of showing what your home would look like on this double-page spread. I want to ask you, do you think when a buyer looks at this, they're automatically going to think the value of your home is worth more than if it appeared as a quarter-page ad with amongst other homes? And most vendors get it. You know, they understand its perceived value.
And Tom, listen, I'm a printer, right? So I don't want the audience to think that I'm saying the brochures are the end-all be-all. But what I am saying is the end-all be-all is those 50 people who walk through that door. If you as an agent are not creating a unique experience for them, marketing, personality, digitally, all the stuff, right, is especially in this market, you're doing a disservice to the vendor and a disservice to yourself. And you know, John, I just think there's a lot of upside left in that on the kitchen counter of every single open for inspection.
I totally agree with everything. One quick observation and 2 quick questions. First one, Tommy, you're the only bloke I've ever met that actually has a water bottle that's colour coordinated with his shirt. That is as good as I've seen. Mate, how good is that? Just for today, you're
Right, bought in Byron Bay, John. Same shop, I think.
Same shop.
Same shop.
If you're listening to this podcast, find it on YouTube or wherever it is, maybe Tom's website, because it's worth it. I've never seen someone coordinate his water bottle. 2 quick questions. Social media, how much did you invest? What percentage or how many dollars in social media?
John, I think that there is a bandwidth right there, which I think is about right, depending on where it is, 300 to 1,000.
How much did you invest? How much did you spend?
John, I'm the worst example. I spent $22,000 selling my house, so I'm the wrong guy to ask that. But I think I spent about $3,000 at the time.
You spent 22 marketing, 22,000.
Yeah, but
I think that's good. And what do you mind if we ask the value of the house?
I sold it for 2.523, I think.
Okay, so that's a hefty, for most people, that would be a hefty investment. I like
1%.
Yeah,
I like
exactly. That 1%, Tom. That's not right, right? I mean, that's what I train on. I can't be a hypocrite.
This next question is the agent. Sorry, we're getting off track here, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
The agent you chose, and you know many, and it would have been difficult because they all would have been on there for a listing like yours. Sounds like a cracker. What did you and or your wife see in that agent that it was impressive, that had you feel they were the right person for the job?
Without me telling, so I had a conjunctional because I had a huge conflict of interest. So I had conjunctional, but one of them took over the whole process, and one of them was my agent. So I won't say who, but one of them was my agent, and they were the one who ultimately got the sale, and it was an interesting experience seeing both approaches. But what got me was I did no prep. I just sat down, and this person very quickly identified the dynamic between my wife and I. And despite the fact that I was an industry insider, very quickly understood that this was now a nurture sale, not an information sale. So they had great EQ, and then converted it into how am I going to make this person feel really comfortable? The other agent by contrast made it an information sale. It told me all about them, told me all about the strategy, talked all about the price. And that wasn't the close for this particular sale. The close was that my wife needed to be felt heard. She had a whole bunch of concerns, that some mundane, some super important, but all of them were important to us. And the other agent, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that whole bit, picked up on that really quickly and shut me out of the sale, which was genius, absolutely genius. And won the listing off the back of it.
Okay, cool.
John and Troy, I just want to add on a subject that's relevant to this off market. And it's increasingly, what's interesting is, gentlemen, it's increasingly becoming an issue. When I speak to an agent, I'll say, oh, how many listings have you got? And they'll say, I've got 5 on market and I've got 3 off market. Right? They never used to say that before. Like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you'd say, how many stock? I've got 5, I've got these 3. So then you turn around and say, elaborate on what you mean by off market. What does off market mean? And I get lots of variations of off market. They don't want anyone to know about it, but if we come across a buyer that's interested, we'll show it. When you sit down and you look at all the sales that agents do in this current market that we're in now, there is very few of those properties that are off market, labeled off market properties that sell. I'm a supporter of, there are times where I think to myself, and there's certain agents have got this ability, like Collier's good, and the certain agents got this ability where they list a property and they think, I've got that buyer there, I know who that buyer is. But for most people in this current market, off-market properties sit there like an antique listing at an antique store, like nothing happens with them. What do you think, guys?
John, I got so many opinions. John, I'll let you go first. I got so many opinions on that.
No, well, look, I think there's a few basic things, Tommy, which will be obvious to our listeners. Number one is, we talk about you can't sell a secret, and as Seth rightly said, He wanted to see 100,000 people connect with his property and, a couple of hundred come and look at it, as opposed to something else. So off market, you're always going to get, 1 to 10% of the traffic through. And it's, you're relying on that agent to be able to identify, find and attract the needle in the haystack. Number one. Number two is I think buyers are always somewhat reticent and skeptical about the genuine intent of a vendor, because if you've got a good property and you're serious about selling and you're committed to the process and your price expectations are reasonable, you're probably going to auction it or at least go private treaty. You're certainly not going to hide it from the world. So I think it automatically has people think, well, it's obviously way too overpriced and they're not in a hurry and they could just be dipping their toe in the water. So, but Seth, over to you. I think they're just my two obvious takeaways that's what happens in the real world when someone lists an off market.
Yeah. So sorry, Tom, that's an interesting subject, right? Because 2 years ago, the biggest thorn in my business's side was off markets exploded. Like we literally had 30% of the Melbourne listing volumes in the inner city at one point was off market. Like it was insane. If you look at the official stats, what was actually happening was a third of properties were transacting in secret. And when you're in my game, it was a disaster. That has dropped to virtually nothing. So I'm going to make an argument, which it's rich for me to say this, but I'm probably right, is that off markets are an absolute failure of vendor management, because in this market they do not work, and there's no market for them, at least from what we can see. And I think that if you've got a vendor who's concerned and wants to go off market, the problem isn't that they want to go off market. The problem is that they've got fear, they've got apprehension, they've got concern. And your job as an agent in that situation is to not address the symptom, which is they want to have an off market campaign, is to address the cause, which is that this person has apprehension, concern that they're not going to sell their property. And you need to transition that conversation away from the symptom. I want to use the sell method, to the cause, which is I'm shit scared and I'm really worried that I'm going to waste some money. And we see that like crazy right now in our pay later business, because a year ago, pay later was like 40%. It's now like 65% of vendors want to pay later. And that has nothing to do with their financial position. It's got nothing to do with whether they got money in the bank. It is all about this mental state of apprehension, fear, and concern. And when people are a bit scared or worried about the sale, they want to do everything they possibly can to stop.
I find that fascinating. You're telling me out of 100 vendors, 65% are going to choose to pay later, knowing that there's a small fee attached to the pay later, yeah. And let's call it 6% or thereabouts. Would that be fair enough to say?
Yeah, exactly, Tom. And that'll be tonight, right? There'll be 500 people tonight who'll give them that choice. They're going to 65% will pay later. A year ago, it was like 38%. So it's almost double. And it's all about the psychological fear that, oh my God, I don't know if it's going to sell. I don't know if it'll be time. I don't know if I'm going to get the price I'm right, which is fair enough. It's a tough market, right? And it's great. But if you've got somebody who wants to go off market, just as an agent, your job then is to figure out, great, how can I make this process comfortable and de-risk it for this person? How do I get them to market? Because I'm not going to sell it off market in this market. How do I take them on that journey? Is it about giving them payment options? Is it about giving them a sort of 3-week low cost entry into the marketing? There's lots of different tools, and I'm looking at, between John and Tom, you guys have come up with so many innovative ways to create soft launches and other things into market. But you need to go into problem solving mode, because I'm just seeing no evidence that off market works.
This is to all of you. What do you think are the qualities of agents that are really good at the vendor paid advertising piece? They've got this ability where they seem to come back with listings that have got decent budgets and their properties are beautifully marketed, both digital and social, any traditional methods they're using. What do they have in common? You've got a few in the McGrath group. There's quite a few in there that are very good marketers.
Yeah, Tom and John and Seth, I believe it comes down to two main things. The first of all, their product knowledge about the products they're actually selling is second to none. And the second part of it is belief. They actually believe the product is going to work. And we all know ourselves, if you've got confidence and belief amongst something that you're selling or you're using or anything out there, the consumer good, you're more likely to be inclined to tell people about that product and that service. So for me, it does come down, the very best I've seen, Tom, are definitely they have those two traits. They know the product, they really understand in great detail of what it is, and they have a belief structure around selling it that they know that they can't get a premium price without using that service.
Yeah, John, do you want to add anything?
No, reinforce. It's also not just knowing it, Troy, I agree with you. However, it's storytelling. You know, they're good at telling case study stories. They're good at explaining how social media targeted marketing works. They're good at explaining how there's active and passive buyers. And here's how we get to one set. And here's how we get to another. And yeah, they're just confident. You know, people want to deal with confident agents. And if you know your stuff and you're sure and you come across like that, people are going to buy. 9 out of 10 people are going to buy, whereas a lot of agents are hesitant. Oh, look, we could market, but you don't have to spend any money if you don't want to. It's up to you, and maybe we could start without. And they kind of come across nervy. You actually want someone to say, you know, Seth, you said to me at the beginning of this conversation that you want to maximize price, and I agree with you. Here's how we're going to do it, and it's going to cost you a little bit up front, but you're going to get a massive return on your investment down the back end. Let me take you through how, and I'll tell you about a couple of recent sales where we did exactly this and how it worked. And when you hear that energy and they can back it up with stuff and confidence, and yeah, it's very, very good. Seth, as you were there, I was just working out 500 tonight at 65% times. Jesus, you've got a good living there going there. What a great business you've got, Seth. Congratulations to you. I just did the number. My calculator actually broke. It didn't have enough numbers on the screen to actually work out your annual revenue there. So I'm very, very proud of you. Whatever it is, I have to get a better calculator. Bloody brilliant, Tom. We're in the wrong industry.
It's a great. By the way, for those that don't know, it's CampaignAgent is the business that Seth heads off. I was just going to say, John, you were talking about case studies. Marcus Chiminello. When I was in my early parts of my interviews, I always used to interview agents that were good at marketing because it sort of was in line with the work that I did at News Corp. Marcus Chiminello to me was up there with the best of the best because one day I overheard him presenting in his office to a client, and what he had done is he'd taken an old paper and he had scribbled on there with a highlighter what the property sold for, what the reserve was, what the marketing campaign was. And then what he did is he ran through stories. He said, hey, I want to let you know, I had these owners here, they're lawyers, John and Susan, and they were very reluctant about marketing. And I said to them, they've got to be careful because a lot of owners lose hundreds of thousands of dollars at the time of sale if they get this bit wrong. And I just want to show you what they did. They invested 20 grand in the campaign. They had a reserve of 1.5 and it sold for 1.7. And he's flipping through the paper and he's showing them results from 4 weeks ago, had some brochures and this and that. And I remember saying to him, mate, that's, you know, I mean, that was compelling to me listening from a distance. He says, stories sell, facts tell. You've got to be a good storyteller. You've got to tell good stories. And stories in our business are case studies.
Yep. Tommy, you just, I love that dialogue. I just wrote it down. I'm going to teach it, Troy. We're going to teach it in. Lots of people lose hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to save 5,000. And it's true, isn't it? If you've got a house like yours, Seth, you know, which is worth, you know, a couple of million or more, we're not talking about 400,000. It's possible that two people could hammer it out for another 100,000 or 200,000 if they get serious on it. In fact, I'm sure that's exactly what does happen. So, but sometimes you get an agent saying, look, you know, well, we could spend 15, but I've got a budget here for 4,000, which is an easier one. And if we don't sell, so the fact that you invested, you know, probably double what most agents or many agents would have said, oh, we can get away with 10 or 12 cents, no problem. You know, you probably made yourself 200,000 off the back of of an extra $10,000 investment. So yeah, I think that's the dialogue is outstanding. Seth, if you're an agent, and I know you're not, but I know you know a lot, and you're one of the better salespeople personnel I've met. Are there any things that come to mind for you? Again, question without notice. I apologise for it, but you see a lot of agents the best, and many that are way below the best. Is there anything that you, if you became an agent tomorrow, you would be doing that you think you could share with us?
Oh, that's so you do think about it, I suppose. It's a good question. So I think a couple of things I'm seeing out there. Firstly, I think that there is the VPA side of things. I think the stories we can tell right now in this market are particularly compelling. This is I would love to be selling and or buying in this market because it's a low volume market, but it's a very balanced market. And in Melbourne and Sydney, it feels like we're getting great results. So if I was out there in the marketplace right now, I would be saying, I'd be talking a lot about the opportunity to stand head and shoulders above the competition at relatively low cost. Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, everybody is concerned and fearful in this marketplace. It means that for an extra $1,000 or $2,000 in marketing, we can stand well and truly above the competition at much lower cost than it would have cost us 12 months ago. And the impact is going to be far greater because there's less competition and the buyer pool is actually quite strong. So if I was an agent in this market, I actually think that the story I'd be telling vendors is pretty compelling, is that now is the time to invest. And I also think that the agent's going to get great boom for their buck because I think marketing is going to help them get the next listing as well. I think that also, John, agents need to really think about the psychology of the market right now, is that people are scared, people are hearing all of this crap on the media about how bad it is. But when you actually get to the market, it's not that bad a market. It's actually a better market than everybody thinks. I don't know if we'll be in 5 months. I'm a little concerned about 5 months, but right now it's a great market. But as an agent, your job is to nurture and give comfort and to make people feel like you're doing everything to de-risk this for them. When you're in a market of greed, when the market's booming, you want to sell the dream. When you're in a market of fear, you want to give comfort and you really want to help people with that helping hand. So if the first thing I would be doing in this market as an agent would be doing a lot of listening, I'd be saying, listen, here's how we're going to make this process as risk-free and as impactful for you as possible. We are going to be stewards to make sure that you're getting the best outcome. And we understand that this environment that you're going to want to do everything you can to mitigate risk, to maximize outcome. It's a very different approach than a boom market. And I think that once you switch your mindset to the fact that this is a fear-driven market, not a greed-driven market, it actually helps you think about how to talk to that vendor. I think the worst thing you could do in this market would be to be trying to appeal to people's greed, and because people just aren't that stupid. It's too difficult to market. They want experts who are going to steward them. So, I think in this market, John, I'd be very focused on de-risking and making it as easy as possible for people to say yes to me, would be my short answer. And I think the thing, and I know we all, I've said this before and I'll say it again, is own a channel. Like, I don't care what it is, but if you're an agent, I don't care whether you own video, TikTok, Pinterest, Facebook, the newspaper, the letterbox, but for Christ's sake, pick one channel that you are the best at. Be a Peter Chauncey, own the letterbox. Be a Matt Steinweed, own social media. I don't care. Whatever your poison is, but never forget that nobody ever won this war by being spread out in everything. Somebody picks a channel that nail it. So I would pick print, John, because I know it. But if you're, just doesn't matter. Pick something that you can own and be the very best in your marketplace. You're only competing for like 1,500 listings. Like, make sure that all of them know you.
Yeah. Very good. I
Well
know
said.
Tommy, we're running out of time a little
Yeah.
bit. I just want to just to explain, because I guess to a degree we've assumed that people know when new campaign agent, and this is not a paid ad, and Seth's not paying for this. You're just a friend of ours, a friend of the business. But your business, one of your businesses, but I guess the one we've referred to today, Seth, CampaignAgent, you give vendors the opportunity of you funding the campaign for a period of about 6 months, or up to 6 months, or settlement, and they pay a relatively small dollar amount, a few $100s generally speaking.
Exactly.
That privilege, so they don't have to pull out their credit card, or they don't have to put 10,000 on their Amex card for 6 months and so forth. And I know that we've certainly embraced it as a company, because we're all about making it easy for the customer to do business with us. And, you know, we get, as you know, we get no kickbacks from you. We don't want any, and you don't give any to the industry. You're there as a service. So, yeah, for anyone that wants to look it up, have a look at CampaignAgent and have a chat to Seth or one of his guys. But, you know, you've been a great supporter of the industry, Seth, not just in terms of the business you offer, but you offer a lot of insights. And, you know, our relationship probably goes back 20, 25 years, I think. And you also do our beautiful brochures. So we thank you for that. But, yeah, I think it's interesting, guys, that this is an interesting market. I agree with you that I think, you know, it's going to be a good few months, and then it might be a nervous few months as some of those fixed rate loans come off, and there's a little bit of kind of chaos there. And then I think it's going to stabilize, and I think 2024 is going to be quite a nice positive environment. So we'll see, I guess. But it's been fantastic to have you on, because you kind of, you know, you're not an agent, but you know a lot about agents, and you can give insights because you're dealing with agents all the time, you know, for various things. So we certainly thank you for coming on board today.
Appreciate it, guys.
And
Always appreciate it.
I think you're in Sydney next week, so I look forward to seeing you then and grabbing a coffee.
Great.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Tom, Troy, John, great.
So thank you so much. And you did. I do think some people are aware of you, because you're one of the few people that were in Australia, non-real estate agents, presenting to the agents at ARIC last year.
Wow. Talking about the bucket list for me, Tom. That was about the highlight of my professional career.
Yeah, well, you did a super job, because you know, there was no commission breath or, you know, product pushing there. You went in there and gave people great content. And on that note, I do want to remind people, because there's the buzz has begun. It's look, it's probably 10 weeks away. ARIC is about 10 weeks away, and I want to confirm the dates of the 28th and the 29th of May. Yep. That's right, Troy, 28th and 29th of May.
Correct.
So,
yep. Sunday, Monday.
Yeah. The best thing that you can be doing right now, even if you haven't bought your ARIC ticket, which you should buy your ARIC ticket, and we've got so many real estate gym members that have jumped on. We've been encouraging them to get early and get their accommodation and get their airfares, because one thing that we know is airfares now. Having said that, Gold Coast is probably the best place to fly to in Australia in terms of airfare prices, but we just know the earlier that you book for airfare and accommodation, the better. So it's the same venue. We love that venue. The agents don't want to leave that venue. They absolutely love and adore going to the Gold Coast. Seth, I know that you're there. I think you're coming there as a capacity of a sponsorship. You're a sponsors there, aren't you?
We've got 15 people there, and I want to repeat, the accommodation and flights are good to book early. It's getting tougher.
Yeah,
could be packed.
All righty, Tracy, John, Seth, thank you so much. And as they say, Susan, you're in the background. You're going to ask me what the title's going to be. You got to stand out to win out. That's the title for this podcast.
Well, Tom, Troy, thank you. Susan.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. Bye, John. Bye, Tom.